So why patience? Why is that so important? Well, for one, Paul calls it a fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience. So it's a pretty big deal if it's listed there. But James wants to talk to us about something pretty important about patience and uses a pretty interesting image. This is what he says, verse 7. Be patient, therefore, brothers, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until it receives the early and the late rains. Two different kinds of rains, the early and the late. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. I am an avid photographer. During COVID, everybody picked up a hobby. My wife was crocheting. Did she ever crochet? No. Do we have all the yarn still? Yes, we do. I picked up film photography, which I thought was fun, which was cool. And I just went all in. So I started developing all of the photos of my house. And I was just in my bathroom in the dark, complete darkness, just like playing with film. I felt like I was 5 years old again. I would tell all my friends, and my friends would come over, and they were like, well, we want to watch you do it. And we were like, sick, let's go to the bathroom. And so like me and these like two guys are like in the bathroom in pitch darkness, not realizing this was not going to be what we thought it was going to be. It's just three guys in the dark, just going, cool. We're just going to sit here and wait. And one of the things that this kind of taught me about this kind of process of developing film is one thing that was really interesting is if you expose it to the light too early, you damage the film. But actually, if you leave it in the chemicals too long, it actually distorts the image. Patience, there's timing to this when it comes to the development and the growth of our soul. There's a pastor, his name is Tim Keller, he recently just passed away. He would say to all pastors, don't write a book until you're 50. You need to wait. You need to sit on things. Don't be so urgent. Don't rush into so much. It is something that you and I need to learn. So what is patience? Patience, let me just kind of dance around the definition a little bit. Patience is the will to wait. Patience is delayed gratification. Patience is trusting God's timing and not yours. Actually, the word patience he uses here in James chapter 5 is macrothumos. Macro, right? Macro, long or large, and thumos being kind of this, it's supposed to give this image of an emotional blaze, a long blaze. It's like a fire outside that you keep putting wood on that lasts for a very long time. That's what patience is. And the image of impatience is when all the fire goes out. You're done with your time. You know when everyone's trying to kick you out, it's like when the ugly lights go on at Cactus Club, right? You're like, ooh, they're kicking us out. It's when the fire goes out outside in the campsite, ooh, it's time to go back into the tent. When the fire is gone, it is over. Time is up. Impatience is to give you that image, and you know what that feels like. Maybe it's a child who's just in your face, is like, you're dumb, you're dumb, you're dumb, you're dumb. You're like, oh my goodness, I'm about to pop off, right? That lashing out, whether it's of the will, with the hands, with the heart, with your words, that lashing out is the impatience. The emotional blaze has been given up and you have lashed out to say, let me take control of the situation and let me make something happen. This is the impatience that James is talking about. And the interesting example that he gives here is of a farmer. And the farmer's temptation, remember there's two rains. There's the early and the late rain. And those rains are important in order to yield the harvest of the crop. And the temptation was threefold. One, a farmer would walk out and they would see the soil and everything was very dusty. And they would look at the soil and they would say to themselves, the rains are never going to come. What's the point of even planting? And they would give up before they even started. They didn't trust and rely that the rains were going to come. So before even beginning the process of development, they've already said no. The other process was, okay, the rains aren't coming, but we have to plant. We have to plant. And because you weren't patient, it's not that you gave up, it's that you went too soon and you didn't wait for the timing. And you would put all of your seed into the ground before the rain showed up, and all of a sudden you would yield nothing because you went faster than God did. But there was a third temptation, and this is the weird temptation, and most of us are gonna fall into this one, which is the first rains come, you plant your seed, and you see God's blessing one time, and all of a sudden the things begin to grow. And then you get nervous about the second rains. And because you're so nervous about the second rains, what you begin to say to yourself is, okay, maybe I should just cut out all of the harvest now, because what if that doesn't come? Then maybe I just have to take control of the situation and get as much as I can now. And what begins to happen is I harvest too quickly and I give up on all of what God had for me and his intention in the beginning. I took control of the situation. I have to make the most of this. I have to get what's worth in this moment. And all of these things that we see really is a longing for control. See how patience and control are just very close together. Control is a horrible idol, let me tell you that. So the person who worships control has this kind of mantra in their soul. If I want it done right, I will do it myself. And what begins to happen is if you see this kind of impatience, this need for control, that there begins to be this kind of wheel of torment that happens in your soul where you try to get control of your environment and then you can't. So then you worry, and then you get anxious, and then you get restless, which only makes you want to control the situation even more, which makes you fearful and worry more, and it just becomes over and over and over again where fear and control begin to be this kind of spectrum that you oscillate towards back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, because why can't it happen in my timing? It's not just in circumstances in your life, it's the way that you handle your money. It's the way that you see friends and family and the people around you. You begin to micromanage every single space in your life. And you begin to see fear as the thing that makes you want to control all the more. And then you begin to think, should I trust God or really should I take this into my own control? I love this text because it says that there's a lot of different things that we wait for. But ultimately, if you're a Christian, you are not waiting on something, you are waiting on someone. Right? It's the coming back of the Lord is what James is really trying to get to his audience. We're waiting on him. And because of him, this waiting is really important for us. Waiting is good in a lot of different ways. The Croatian, is that how it works? I apologize. I'm not very confident with that word. The Croatian Cultural Center. Croatia, it's a country. The Croatian Cultural Center came to us like a year and a half of us trying to look for a venue. And we were really trying to target one venue, and it just would not work. It would not work. We would wait. And I remember getting myself frustrated. God, what is wrong with you? We're trying to do a good thing. What's happening? And then we got the Croatian Cultural Center, and we were like, this is the best. And looking back in that situation, what was the waiting for? The waiting was not so we got a worse venue. It was actually so we got a better one. Me and my wife, when we were looking for a home, I actually could have walked here. That's how close I lived to this space. I didn't because of who I am. It was a character issue. Driving, Uber, walking, I drove. That house, we were frustrated that we couldn't find anywhere to live. We would look at places. We would try to, put bids on different places around Vancouver, and it just would not work. And we got frustrated. God, what is happening? And it's because he had the best possible place for us ready, waiting in the wings. Maybe the patience actually isn't because there's something better for you. Maybe it's because the thing that you are asking for is the wrong thing. Ladies, you know the guy in high school who wore the Ed Hardy bedazzled shirts? And you were like, wow, that guy is cute. And then the problem is that guy now is still wearing the Ed Hardy, still wearing the bedazzled shoot, still has the Timberlands on. And then you look at God and you go, God, thank you for giving me what I did not want. So it's not only that he's going to give you a better thing, maybe it's the thing that actually you're asking for the wrong thing. Why would I give you what's ultimately going to be harmful for you? But what if there's an other aspect? I love that James brings up Job. Job, this amazing experience. You know how the beginning of Job goes? It says the Satan goes and talks to God, and they're having this conversation, and God's like, Job's the guy. And Satan's like, no, he's not. And God's like, yes, he is. He goes, okay, let's try it out. Let's see what happens. Let me do all these things to Job and see if his character and integrity holds up. God's like, in the words of the kids, he's like, bet, I did that at youth camp. I used the word Riz. They were like, you're cool. I was like, yes, I am. And it's kind of interesting experience of God with Satan and putting Job right in the middle. And doesn't that kind of sound like a little bit weird or strange or seem awkward, the waiting? Sometimes when friends will come over to my house, I have a puppy. His name is Bo. He's a year and a half. He's better than all of your dogs. He's amazing. I created enemies in the room. I can feel it, the tension. Sometimes people will come over and immediately what they want to do is they want to see him do tricks, right? So we get the treat and I'm like, paw, and he's like, paw. And I like, other paw, and he goes, paw, and I go, lie down. And one of the coolest tricks, my favorite trick, is when I'll go, Bo, sit, and Bo will sit. And I get the treat and I put it really far away. And I go, wait. And my friends look at me like, oh, dude, you're so cool. I'm like, I know. I go, wait. It's like an awkwardly long time. And then I go, okay. And Bo will run and he'll grab the treat. And all of my friends are like, actually that whole circumstance is actually the evaluation of our relationship. Do you trust me? Are you going to be obedient? Can we show off the strength of our relationship to somebody else? You see how important patience now starts to become between you and God? Some of us don't know how to learn this lesson. If you're the kind of person who has things happen in their life and you say to yourself, why does this keep happening again? Maybe the question you have to ask yourself, if you are waiting on God, maybe ask your question, is God waiting on me for something? As an example, I remember being however old you are when you try to get your L, okay? 12? How old are you when you get your L? Whatever. Anyways, I go and I do the exam and I go and they put me on like an incline and parallel park, and then I remember I go Superman, so up and away, and you gotta turn the wheel and whatever, and I'm ready. I'm like, I'm slaying this. And then the lady goes, okay, go. And I go, sweet. Hit the throttle, boom, get out. She goes, okay, we can go back now. Which is never good. Oh gosh. So I go back. She says, okay, so you didn't pass the exam. And I was like, what? I slayed that. And she goes, because when you got out of the parallel park, you forgot to unlock the e-brake. Automatic fail. Dang it, right? Now I have to like go to school and don't tell anyone that I tried because that's ultimate shame or whatever. Hypothetically, if I go and I do the second test again, do the exact same exam, I get to the same curb and I forget to unlock the e-brake, what will happen? Go back to the lot and fail. And then I try for the third time and I do the exact same exam, I get to the spot and I forget to unlock the e-brake. What's gonna happen if I keep failing the lesson? I get the same exam. I get the same test. If you're not moving on with the test, maybe it's because we haven't learned the lesson. Do you understand how that works? That God is so good and so patient with our soul. He understands what you need to develop in. This is the whole process of theological language we call sanctification. Let's grow. Let's move here. Let's not stay in the same spot. Oh, you don't want to listen? Let's keep going at it. Let's keep going at it. You're going, well, where's the biblical reference? The whole Old Testament. Have you read the book of Judges? It's the same cycle. Over and over and over and over and over. You got this one guy with long hair, one guy's left-handed, this woman comes out of the judge. It's the same story. The whole Old Testament is what? Stop worshiping other gods and worship me. You failed. Okay, let's do this again. Stop worshiping other gods and worship me. Okay, you failed. Let's do this again. Over and over and over again. I love what one writer says about our sanctification. God will proceed at a rate and follow a course which we are ideally suited to the individual, raising successive issues over the years and making a point of the need for growth in one area after another. He seldom shows us all of our needs at once because we would be overwhelmed at the sight. Isn't he good? And not only this patience of the two rains, when we actually get to the very end of it, imagine you were a farmer and you actually plant at the time you're supposed to plant and you harvest at the time that you harvest. At the end of that process, doesn't your perspective begin to change when you look backwards? Why can't we have a longer term view of our lives? Why is everything so immediate? Why is everything so quick? Why are we in this impatience culture? My grandmother, amazing individual, closest thing to Jesus you'll ever meet in your entire life. Amazing. My grandmother is from Honduras. Her first job she had was she was a communicator with Morse code. She was a telegrapher, the beep, 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 right? And that means like lol or something. And so she goes and she's communicating with the things. And her boss comes up to her. Her boss comes up to her and says, hey, I want you to train another employee. And so my grandmother faithfully trains this employee. At the end of the training process, her employer goes to her and says, okay, you are relieved of your duties and you've just trained your replacement. My grandmother is pregnant with my mom. And my grandfather was a civil engineer. So at this point, they were both a little bit kind of fluid in terms of jobs, and so they made the call to move from a rural town of Honduras to the capital of Honduras. They move into this community. My mom grows up, and she's probably like 5 years old in this community. There's this woman who's around the community, and she's a part of the church. And she would meet all of the kids, and she would take all of the kids to church. And my mom is amazing. She's amazing. She's amazingly spiritually gifted. Her most prominent spiritual gift is the gift of guilt trip. And so my mom, at a very young age, probably 5 years old, saw that all the other little girls would go with their parents to church. And so my mom went to my grandmother, who didn't attend church, and said to her, all the other little girls go with their moms, but my mom doesn't go with me. Guilt trip. So my grandmother goes to church. She hears the gospel, radically changed. My mom grows up in church. She immigrates from Honduras to Canada. Then she is blessed in all of her life with a precious, beautiful baby boy. And I grew up in a Christian church, Spanish Christian church, and hear all these things about the Lord, grow up in a kind of way that later on in life, eventually, because of my grandmother's presence, my grandma ended up moving from Honduras to Canada. She was basically the replacement for my father, who I never grew up with. My grandma, every single morning, would wake up and read the same Rainbow Bible. She'd sit there and read every single day. Regardless of what was happening in her life, she would sit there and read this faithful presence in my life, to the point where when I turned 18, I got tricked into ministry. Longer story, doesn't matter. And I say yes to the call that God has in my life. And I go and I pastor and preach and do all these things. And eventually I find myself here today in front of all of you beautiful people. Isn't it crazy to think that the only reason why I am here standing in front of you right now is because 60 years ago, my grandmother got fired from her job? Doesn't that make you think differently about that moment? Where she was stressed, angry, frustrated. But if she saw the end in mind, look at how differently that moment looks. Do you trust him or do you not trust him? Do you trust him or do you not trust him? Because when you don't trust him, James has that as well. He says this in verse 9. Do not grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. As an example of suffering and patience, brothers, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. So what's grumbling? Grumbling is when people are frustrating, disappointing, disillusioning to you. And how do we respond? We respond outwardly in a very negative sense. We respond to people who disappoint us and frustrate us with cynicism, resentment, negativity. We lash out, we freak out. We know the moments as maybe for parents in the room when you kind of act out of impatience and not kind of the duty of, okay, discipline and impatience are not the same thing. We've realized when we've lashed out at someone, it's enough. Or a friend or a coworker, when somebody says their name, we just go, ugh, them. What does it show? This impatience shows this, we've given up on them. The logs are out, I'm done. Time to go. I've given up on that individual, and my reactions towards them show that I've given up grumbling. You think that's just towards people? Ooh, no, that's directed towards God too. God, why have you? God, why didn't you? God, what's happening? God, you owe me. God, why? 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 Don't we understand that the word why? Okay, my wife's not here so I can tell the story. So, my wife, amazing. She's the kind of person who I'm glad you met me first because you would love her more, but we were first friends, okay? My wife is incredible in a lot of different ways. One of the things that I really struggled with early on in our marriage is that I would say, hey, so this is the plan for the day, we're gonna do this, blah, 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 and she would always go, why? And then, because I'm a patient and loving husband, I would go, this is why, beautiful wife. And I'd explain to her the day. When that happens like 100 times, you begin to realize that your patience really wears thin. One time, in an act of impatience, I yelled at her, you know we can still do something even when you don't accept it to be true. you know we can still do something without your permission or you accepting it to happen. And what I began to realize, and what I said to her in a moment of impatience, is your why is just a scream for control of the situation. Control. And let me tell you, if you're married, don't do that. It was a bad situation. It was a bad spot. What happens is, don't you realize that you're actually the most impatient with the people that love you the most? Why? Because they have the greatest opportunity to hurt you. And so you try to grab the reins. So why is this such a big deal? Why are we even talking about this in church? Why is patience such a big thing? Okay, I get it, Michael. Patience is good, impatience is bad. No. The categories are even worse than you think. Because for James, this isn't just a bad and good thing. This is like a sin thing. Why is this a sin thing? It's a sin thing because the moments of your life, every single day, that come up to yourself of patience or impatience is just one simple question. Who do you trust? You trust me? Or you trust yourself? It's God's question to say, do you trust me? Or do you trust yourself? The moment that you lash out at a friend or a family member is you trying to take control of being the judge. Don't you know that you're in forgiveness? You're not forgiving of someone. You're holding on to the burden. Is you just trying to judge them for their behavior on yourself? Well, because they did that to me, look at how I'm going to react. I'm going to avoid them. Judgment. I've just made a judgment. Somebody said something rude to me, so how am I going to respond? By saying a rude thing back. Why? Because that's what they deserve, and I'm going to be the judge that hands out the punishment. And what we don't fundamentally understand is that a lot of our issues happen because we don't understand our role. To be the judge is not our job. It's his job. He's the judge at the end of this. He's the one we are waiting and we are longing for. Don't we understand this? It's a lack of humility for us to think that we actually have more control than we do. We do not have this. We cannot control this. We cannot be the kinds of people who constantly say, I'm going to be the one who hands out the punishment. Why? Because that's putting myself on a pedestal to say, I'm the one who needs to be trusted the most. And it's not true. It's not true. To make a decision, think about this. If I make a decision every day of trusting God or trusting myself, and I choose to trust myself, doesn't that do something to my soul? If I'm just constantly in very many small decisions, making the choice of trusting myself in that practice over and over and over and over again, when stakes are really high and I run to trusting myself, now you realize why it is such a big deal. Do you trust him or do you not? Do you trust him or do you not? The moments where you say, God, this isn't fair. God, why are you doing this? Do you trust him or do you not? And it's not to go to God with your concerns or issues. It's not, oh, I can't complain to God anymore. No, that's not what this is about. You read the Psalms. David constantly is saying, God, what is going on? What's happening? But it's not coming from this attack sense. Let me tell you an example. When I was in high school, like 8th, 9th grade, Justin Bieber was like the coolest thing on the planet, right? And his hair did things that my hair did not do. So I remember one time I was in the bathroom, I was like trying to do a hair thing and it wasn't working. I was like on YouTube trying to figure out how to do it. And I couldn't figure it out. And I somehow came to the conclusion that the reason why my hair did not do the things that Justin Bieber's hair did was because my mom continued to buy me Pert Plus from Superstore, 2-in-1 conditioner. And so in a fit of rage, my mom's downstairs watching a novella. I come down the stairs and I go, this is your fault. She's like, what is happening right now? And I go, it's all because of Pert Plus. And then I go upstairs and I leave. She thought she's raising a crazy person, just yelling at her about the fact that this is her problem that has zero context. You see how me running down the stairs and going, this is your fault, is very different than me walking down the stairs and going, Mom, my hair is just not working. Help me. Can you help me? Why doesn't this work? You see how different that is? You're the problem versus this situation is the issue. God, walk in. I will make room. God, walk into the space. Be here. I need you right now. Not God, you're the problem, you're the issue. Doesn't that just perpetuate a sense of I'm the only one who I can trust? Do you trust him or do you not? This constant looking at ourselves. My situation, making all of my sins and issues so big that God can't get into. You know what C.S. Lewis calls it? He calls it the hell of eternal autobiography. Why? Because I think I'm writing my own story. I think I'm the one in control. I think I'm the one who's doing all the work, and it's just simply not true. What is James' example? Verse 11, behold, we consider those blessed who remain steadfast. You have heard of the steadfastness of Job, and you have seen the purposes of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. Think of Job's life. He had relational troubles. He lost his family. He had horrible friends. He had physical trouble. He had mental distress. His wife told him to curse God and die. He had economic trouble, spiritual trouble, all the things that happened to his life. You would have thought that they would consume him. And over again, you saw Job meet the pressure head on. At the end of the story, maybe you will say to yourself, the reason why that patience was worth it for Job is because he got double of everything that he lost. Is that really why? Or isn't it even better in the midst of troubles and trials and situations that are evil towards us that we could actually walk to the end of it with greater character integrity in God's eyes? Isn't that actually more important? And if we don't think that is, then actually that says more about us than it does about him. Patience. The kind of person who has gone through all of the worst trials in life. Job, who now God has put as the great teacher for every single one of us in the room. So this is the end of the sermon. This is the time where we transition and I give you the 7 steps on how to be more patient. I'll give you the techniques and the tips and the things that you can do every morning. It starts with a cold plunge, like every TikTok in the history of the world. Why? I don't like cold. Stop telling me to do that. Get a vision board. Set your goals up. This is how you become more patient, have a more long-term perspective. None of those things are true. I just think about, as a kid, I loved going to like water parks. Like, you know those water parks, like all the water. It's a very simple lesson that you learn at a water park. You get close to the water park, you get drenched. You go away from the water park, you dry up. You get close to the water park, you get drenched. You walk away from the water park, you dry up. You get closer to the Lord and his Spirit, you become patient. You walk away from the Lord and you get him out of his life. And don't be so surprised that you're impatient. If this is the fruit of the Spirit, then I have to be in step with the Spirit. If this is abiding in the vine, then I have to be close to the vine, which means that patience in your life doesn't come from all of these tools. It's not you getting on Notion or whatever kind of productivity app that you have for your patience-ness. It's no, get close. Jesus' language, he says what? Abide, remain, slow down, stop moving, just be here. And what you begin to realize is that once you get close to him, it's not that you grow in patience. It's you find yourself in the midst of patience that has become incarnate. There is no one who is more patient. There is no one who in the midst of beating and flogging would say, Father, forgive them, for they have no idea what they're doing. Who in the midst of sweating and crying, of blood dripping down his face, will persevere to the end. It says in Isaiah that his face was like flint when he saw his death. There was no movement or moving away from the task that he was going to do. Imagine that. Some of us don't think that what Jesus did was a big deal. We think we could have a courageous moment where we would give our life for somebody else. You know, this is not the same thing, right? In theology terms, we call it omniscience, which means that God knows everything that happens. Which from millennia eternal, the Son of God knew what he was walking into. From millennia, to century, to decade, to year, to hour, to minute, to second, he walked towards the cross. Didn't move. You and I cannot do that. Patience incarnate for you and I. This is what happens. That Jesus Christ, through his perfect patience, atoned for our impatience, so that the Father can be endlessly patient with us, never giving up on us, letting us down, or pulling back from us, even when we fail him over and over and over again. So look at God, the Creator, and let it humble you. Because impatience is a lack of humility. Say, I don't know, more often in your life. Second, look at God not as Creator, but as Redeemer, atoning for you through the cost of the cross. That warms your heart into the love for God and others, because impatience is also a lack of love for God and for other people. Thirdly, look forward. Get enough hope in your life. Realize that everything is going to be okay in the end, because patience is also a lack of hope. Tim Keller, who I already referenced in this message, passed away a month and a half ago or something, and this kind of clip came up on social media of one of the final podcasts that he said. And what he says I thought was just so encouraging. He said, listen, guys, if the resurrection is true, it's going to be okay. If the resurrection is true, it's going to be okay. So why is patience such a big deal? And why does James make such a big deal out of it? Because it asks you the question, fundamentally, who do you really trust? And I think that's the question that I leave with you today. In your marriages, in your dating life, in your school, with your finances, and with your health, who do you really trust? So, Father, we pray that as we sit with you, we learn from you, we know what it is that you want to do in our souls. We pray that we would settle down. We would not give up too early. We would not cut off the growth short. That we would not rush into things that we're not called to rush in, and that actually we trust your timing more than we trust ours. That we look at you and your greatness. That we look at you and your grace and your mercy on that cross. And that we would remember. We remember what patience looked like. And maybe we can be more of the same. So, Father, we thank you. We love you. And in Jesus' name we want to pray.